Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. We are now a few days into October, and as promised, I was going to need to launch into some more horror movie-based material because, after all I've said over the course of this year about my passion for horror, the fact that I dedicated May, I believe it was, to a horror theme, or at least a week of it. I feel like if I didn't cover some of the most important classic horror movies of all time, sort of throughout the month, then I would be letting myself down. So, of course, there are many horror films that I could cover that I have seen numerous times, and I already have some in mind that I will, but I thought I would at least start with one that I have never seen, and that is 1968's Rosemary's Baby. And it is one of those funny occasions where Rosemary's Baby, there are a couple things that occur to me as I was watching it, and now reflecting on my experience of watching it. Firstly, this is during a period where the definition of horror was much more flexible. We're in a funny time now, I suppose, where, and I think this is possibly sort of a post-90s thing. I don't know why the 90s specifically, but that, where we have a very rigid definition of genre, to the point where, if you look at, say, the Oscar categories, the nominations, people say, oh, well, horrors are never nominated, and then, of course, people will say, well, Silence of the Lambs won, and people will say, well, Silence of the Lambs isn't a horror film. Of course, that's nonsense, it is, but people have increasingly become more binary in their idea of what defines a genre, and consequently it means there's more of a rigid idea of, okay, if we're going to make a film within that would be categorised as horror, it has to hit the hallmarks of horror. And I think that's a shame, because, as I've said, I think filmmaking should be less constructed like that. That's almost a marketing decision. That what you're doing is, by deciding a genre and then deciding to stay in or subvert the trappings of that genre, you're essentially tying yourself to certain tropes and certain mechanisms. Whereas when I watch Rosemary's Baby, it's almost, it is a horror film, but it's almost not a horror film. Because the majority of this film is more a character drama than it is sort of leaning into the supernatural aspect of it. I don't know whether to talk too much about the plot because it is so famous. Okay, the thing I'm thinking is I will discuss the ending, because my approach to seeing the film is that I saw the film like most people. People know how Rosemary's Baby ends. Well, at least the big conceit of it, or anyone who knows the horror genre. As producer wife Helen has pointed out, she doesn't know. But this is a 53-year-old film, and I just feel like, as I say, I have known the ending since I've heard of the film, and I came into it with the perspective of knowing the ending. Because when you watch Rosemary's Baby, at least within the first half an hour, 40 minutes, it isn't a horror film at all. Like, it doesn't even pretend to be a horror film. There are moments and clues going forwards that indicate that it will have, it foreshadows that things that will be paid off. But without the foreknowledge, it's not as telegraphed as a modern horror film would do it. These are just quirky things. These are, you watch it, and like I said, the first 40 minutes could be just a character drama. Even the death of Teresa, the friend that Rosemary makes, isn't presented in a horror way. It is just presented as a tragedy of a girl who's just jumped jumped out of a window and fallen to her death. But it's presented more in a slice of life, the backstory, the fact that she was a drug addict who was sort of taken in by this friendly couple, there isn't a scene to portray the fact that it is, a horror centric. That her motivations are more horror centric. It's presented like a human tragedy, and when we meet Roman and Mina, they aren't. There isn't this thick layer of they are ominous. They are presented as just slightly kooky, over the top neighbours, and the whole drama for the first 40 minutes plays out like you could be watching a kitchen sink, couple adjusting type of story. And yes, it could have gone very wrong. People could have seen it as very dull and boring. But I think it works because you genuinely believe that Guy and Rosemary love each other, and you genuinely believe in their difficulties, the fact that he's a failing actor, the fact that she is, she's something about her that's quite undefined in respect of her wants and her beliefs. She's sort of cast adrift a little bit, and that if you sort of read it from a 21st century perspective, that who she is very much tied in with Guy, and because Guy is a very self-interested person, that his motivations are what propel her to start with, and so therefore that's what her vulnerabilities is what sets her up to be the perfect victim for this cult. And then of course you have, and I'm going to trigger warning what I'm going to say next, because it is a prominent part of the film, but it is to do with sexual assault, even in a fantastical context. But when you have the devil rape scene, it's not that it comes out of nowhere. You're definitely getting a sense of something strange is going on, but it doesn't feel like it's escalating. You genuinely feel like, perhaps, we as an audience are almost being as gaslit by the events as Rosemary. And so when you get to the dream sequence, it is weird. And of course you have the fact that she's having this dream about the boat, and it's intermingled with this sort of cult dream, and then the devil rape scene. It is that sense of, is this... Because it's not horror. It's horrifying, but it's not... It's supposed to be more surrealist. It's supposed to be more illusory, that you get this sense of maybe this is representative of her state of mind as she feels the pressure of this life, of sort of this urban lifestyle, and this, being closed in on. And yet, of course, you have that sense of, but there is something horrifying about it. And then the genre shifts going on from there, and it becomes more like a psychological drama about the ways in which she's being exploited and manipulated and coerced and gaslit. I mean, it's not that these themes weren't there when the film was being made, but from, like I say, from a 2021 perspective on this, the reading is so strong from, I'm absolutely certain that there would be some great essays using, authors, modern scholars, feminist scholars of today, and using Rosemary's Babies to interpret the messages of female entrapment and, like I said, gaslighting, and sort of the exploitation of a woman's body. I think there are some really interesting ways that is presented. And I know that the film is partly about, there's a whole sort of subtext about the idea that because she has drifted away from her Catholic faith, the consequence of that is that she has become a lure for Satanists. But that reading has sort of faded as time has passed. And then, like I say, this more feminist-centric reading is much more interesting and really hits home now. Like, there's a relevance to it, well, just as much then as is now. And there is that sense of microaggressions, and the idea that for a lot of this film, even as you get into the more intense psychological aspect of it, and the idea of her feeling, the pressures of her pregnancy, the pressures of these, these people who are sort of weighing in on her life, even the pressures of her own partner, you get that sense of, there's almost a reading where you go, wouldn't it be great if you could interpret this film as though it is just within her mind. Unfortunately, it's not like that, and it possibly shouldn't be, because it's so clearly a case of exploitation, a story of exploitation, that I suppose trying to make it more ambiguous would almost ruin the clarity of the text. But you do go through sections of the film where you think, this could be in her mind. I mean, as I say, the film's gone to so much effort to establish Guy and Rosemary's relationship that as she becomes less trusting of him and more paranoid and more, starts to get into the more of the occultist stuff, you still Guy doesn't change how he acts. It's only knowing how the film ends that you notice certain lines he says or certain ways he responds to things. But within the moment, he doesn't really, he doesn't feel like he's shifted as a person. He still seems like the same kind of guy. Of course, the justification of that being, he is exactly the same kind of person. And that's exactly why he was perfect to be coerced, to be easily bought, because he is an egotist and really only cares about his own, vanity and his own success over Rosemary as an autonomous being. But like I say, it means it doesn't lay it thick. It really makes you question, well, if he hasn't changed and us as an audience haven't changed, there's nothing in the cinematography that changes. It's shot in a very straightforward way, and I have talked endlessly about the idea of the voyeur audience within films, and this is definitely a case. There are moments in this film where it's very intrusive on this couple's life. We spend a lot of time just watching them in quiet moments, in intimate moments. Very advanced for the for the late 1960s. It's very exposing to who they are. But then going through all that I've gone through over the last year with this project and seeing films like Poor Cow, where you think, oh, actually, or Look Back in Anger, where actually filmmakers were willing to go there. Yes, there were issues of censorship, and yes, there were issues of course, the Hays Code in America, and the the slightly stricter ideas of the BVFC over here. But like I say, filmmakers found ways to get around it, and there was that sense of deeply intimate observations and vulnerabilities, where the characters feel naked. And of course that makes us more confused and more paranoid, because then we don't know who to trust. We don't know if Rosemary is being, is having some kind of breakdown, or whether it's Guy and whether it's the others. And I think that's what makes the text richer, because when you get to the ending, and when everything pays off, and you realise the nature of the manipulation and the coercion and and the way that Rosemary has been broken down, honestly, it's such a strong text. It's so impactful, and really, I understand that obviously the late 60s and the 70s are a period where feminist texts were really coming into strength, and horror is a great platform for oppressed groups, for people to explore ideas of oppression and suppression and repression. And of course, if you put this alongside the Stepford Wives, the original version, again, we were seeing some conversations about women's liberation, and these texts were exploring the ways in which women are exploited and oppressed, and and obviously, as I've always said, horror is supposed to be a metaphor. That you're not supposed to be scared because a ghost is jumping out at you. You're supposed to be scared because the implication of that ghost means more to you as an audience member. That's why I think The Babadook is such a great, a modern great horror, because it means so much more than just a scary monster. I think Rosemary's Baby is a classic. It is remarkable how good it is, even now. And this is a fairly long horror. I've said before that horrors possibly should stay around the 90-minute mark, because like comedy, people can only stay in a certain level of tension for so long without relief. But this film, like I said, takes its time, and it doesn't even make you feel like you're in a horror for a long stretch of it, and then slowly unveils the horrific nature of the narrative and the implications therein. And I just think this is just such a great film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because those all help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.